Good morning, Year 6, and welcome to British Value Day. Today we're going to understand what equality means and we're going to apply it to some case studies further down throughout the video. So in order to be successful in today's lesson, you will need a pen and a piece of paper. So please pause the video here if you haven't got your equipment and get hold of it now, please. Okay, so we have some keywords first, and these will help us to understand the WALT and today's lesson, which is all about equality and how it has changed over time. So the first word is equality. And this means having equal opportunities and rights. It means to be treated fairly, and it also means being able to be supported to reach your full potential. So we know equality is to be treated fairly to allow an individual or a person to reach their full potential. Equality. We then have inequality, and you can tell from the word we have the word equality here, but this word is inequality, and this is when people aren't given equal opportunities and rights, and they are treated fairly and experience discrimination. Discrimination is the unfair treatment of a particular person or a group of people. So it's really important. We are learning about equality today, and you'll understand how inequality was portrayed throughout periods in history. So it's changed over time now, but you will see there was a lot of inequality back in the day. Someone who is a key person in history is Rosa Parks, who fought for equality, and this person is really important as Rosa Parks lived at a time when life was very different for Black and white people, so there was racial inequality here. She is known to have fought for her rights in the African American civil rights movement. It used to be the rule that Black and white people had to sit on different sides of the bus. So you'd have white people sitting at the front of the bus and Black people at the back of the bus. However, on the 1st of December 1955, a bus driver told Rosa to move for a white person. She refused to move and was arrested by the police. When she was freed, which means when she was out of prison, thousands of Black people began to protest. When you're protesting, it's where there's a group of people usually who are fighting for a right. So for example, in this circumstance, it was fighting for equality. That is what they were protesting for. These protests went on for 381 days until the government agreed that all people could sit anywhere on the bus. And that is how it is nowadays. Anyone can sit anywhere on the bus, and we see that ourselves. And that is the same on the train as well. She was named as the mother of the freedom movement and the first lady of civil rights. During her life, Rosa suffered for her beliefs and was even fired from her job as a seamstress and was sent death threats for years. So you can see she really suffered here just because she was fighting for equality, something that we're so lucky to have now. Whereas back in the day, they didn't have equality, and it was really, really hard for people. And it wasn't just inequality between race, it was between gender, age, disability, and you will see that now with some laws that have been passed to enable equality to happen. Equality today. There have been huge developments in equality. Over the years, the vast majority of us are happy studying, working and making friends with people from other ethnic minorities. Some stereotypes, so these are things that people portray about women, such as a woman's place as a home, have begun to fade, and the gender gap is closing. So before there used to be a gender gap where men would be paid more than women, but however now, because of equality today, that is closing, although the progress is very slow. So some companies and workplaces do still pay men more for certain jobs compared to women. We are progressing, but it is slow. There have been huge changes in attitudes. So attitudes are the beliefs and values that us as individuals think towards lesbian, gay and bisexual people. And disabled persons have more rights than ever before. So you can see equality has really changed from periods in history. But inequality still exists in Britain, and more needs to be done to make it fairer. So there are going to be some facts on the screen, and I'd just like you to number the facts 1 to, I believe there's 5 different facts, and you're just going to number them 1 to 5 and just write next to them fair or unfair. So the first one, for example, today there are more CEOs called John, there are female CEOs. So CEO is a person that leads a company. They are higher than a manager. So the chief executive of an organization. And today there are more CEOs called John, then there are females, and I think that is unfair. That is definitely inequality between gender. So I would write number 1 and unfair next to it. So I'd like you now to pause the video and have a go at the 4 statements, writing unfair or fair next to them. Read them carefully. Okay, so I'm going to reveal the answers to you and you're just going to mark along. So disabled adults are 3 times as likely to have no qualifications compared to non-disabled people. And again, I think that's unfair. They should be given equal rights, just like we all have equal rights to study and education, so should disabled adults. 2/3 of lesbian, gay and bisexual students report being bullied. Again, I definitely think that's unfair. Someone should not be bullied because of their sexuality. It's really important. So that is definitely unfair. So far we have 3 unfair statements. Number 4, in the 2010 election, 27 out of 650 people elected to the UK Parliament were ethnic minorities. Ethnic minorities are people from different backgrounds. For example, you can have Black African ethnic minority or British Bangladeshi ethnic minority. So these are Black, Asian and different minority groups. So in 2010, 27 out of 650 people elected to the UK Parliament were ethnic minorities. That is definitely unfair. The proportion here is very small. It's not equal. 27 out of 650 people. And then lastly, nearly 3/4 of Bangladeshi children and half of Black African children grow up in poverty. And again, this is another unfair statement. So as you can see here, there's not equal rights between different genders, sexuality, disability, race, and you can see all of the facts here are definitely unfair. So this shows that Britain needs to do more to make it fairer. So now I'd like you to write down, so this is your do now, so you're just going to write 1 and 2, and you're just going to complete these sentences. So for example, as you can see, I've put a scale here and it's balanced, which means equality has something to do with balance against not just gender, not just sexuality, not just race. There's other things, but we will cover them in today's lesson, but I just want to know what you already know. So just completing these 2 sentences. When I think of equality, I think of, what do you think of? Is it you see equal rights between everybody? Everyone is treated fairly. And then when you think of inequality, what do you think of? So again, if you've forgotten the definition, go back to the video, the start of the video, to help you jog your memory. Okay, so I'm not going to mark through these sentences because everyone will have different ideas, but if you've written something along the lines of, when you think of equality, you think of people being treated fairly no matter their age, class, gender, race, sexuality, disability. And then when you think of inequality, you think of discrimination, people or groups of people not being treated fairly. And again, if you've given examples, that's great. I can't wait for your teachers to read through those. So now we're going to begin the main part of our lesson, and we're going to look at tackling inequality and how Britain has tackled inequality. So over the years, laws have been introduced to tackle discrimination to help people ensure particular characteristics are treated fairly. These laws are called civil laws. Civil laws. Civil laws mostly involve disagreements between people, companies, or organizations. Okay, so whereas criminal law are enforced by the police and the courts, and if they're broken, you can face a serious consequence such as going to prison. So civil law mostly includes disagreements, so this is things that you don't agree with between people, companies or organizations. That's civil laws, whereas criminal laws are enforced by the police. So these are written laws that we have to abide by as citizens of the UK, and they're enforced by the police and the courts. And if they're broken, you could face a prison sentence. Okay, so it's two different types of laws. We have a civil laws and we have criminal laws as well. Okay, so the Equality Act 2010. This is a very important act of law. So an act of law, it has the type of law, so this is the equality, the act, and then the date. So we have the Equality Act 2010, so this is when the law was passed in 2010. So it also makes it law that public bodies like schools must encourage good relations and ensure that everyone has equality of opportunity. This helps to make sure everyone has an equal chance to make the most of their lives and talents. So it's really important. The reason why we have the Equality Act 2010 is to give everyone the equal opportunity to do what they would like to, given that it's abide by the rules. A paired reading activity. When I pause and ask you to pause the video and continue reading, you are going to take the ownership. So I will start. Equality Act 2010 fact sheet. So this will just summarise the facts about the Equality Act. What is the Equality Act 2010? The Equality Act 2010 makes it law that every private, public and voluntary organisation must not discriminate against employees and people that use their services because of particular characteristics. So these characteristics are the protected characteristics we have by law. So for example, age, gender, sex, sexual orientation, race, religion. The Act brings together all previous equality laws, making them simpler, more effective and easier to understand. Who is protected? The Equality Act 2010 makes sure that people with particular characteristics are protected from discrimination. These are the protected characteristics: age, disability, gender assignment, marriage and civil partnerships, pregnancy or maternity, race, religion or belief, sex, sexual orientation. How are they protected? If private, public or voluntary organisations treat people differently because of these characteristics, they could be acting unlawfully, so that means going against the law, breaking the law here. What is an example of unlawful discrimination? So I'd like you to read this section here. So pause the video and read this section of an example of unlawful discrimination. Fantastic, year 6, it's now my turn. Discrimination is treating someone unfairly because of their characteristics. What action can you take if you are experiencing discrimination? If you believe you have been discriminated against or treated unfairly, then you can start by complaining to the private, public or voluntary organisation, and they must do something about it. If they don't, then you could make a claim under the Equality Act 2010. This could result in the organisation being taken to court and sued for their action. So this is sued for their action. They will have to end up paying a big fine. It is best to speak to a lawyer or contact an organisation like the Equality and Human Rights Commission at www.equalityhumanrights.com, who can offer advice and help. So there's about 3 different things here that the action that you can do to take if you are experiencing discrimination. Now I'd like you to pause the video and read, do children and young people have equal protection? So I'd like you to read on from here. Just pause when you stop when you get down here, because I will read the rest. Fantastic, year 6. Now it's my turn. What are public sector equality duties? PSED. The Equality Act 2010 also includes the public sector equality duty. This means public bodies like the police, schools and hospitals not only have to take steps to stop discrimination, but also have to promote equality. So it's really important to promote equality, showing that you're showing these equal values. Public bodies should promote equality of opportunity, for example, by ensuring girls and boys have access to the same apprenticeships, or disabled students have access to all good resources and support they need. Plus, they should promote good relations. For example, schools should have anti-bullying policies and should promote cultural understanding between different ethnic groups. And lastly, what is positive action? That is what you're going to read. So pause the video here and read on from that. Fantastic, year 6. So now we are going to move on to some questions that I'm going to test you about on this reading. So have your piece of paper ready and your pen to answer some questions. Okay, so before we now move on, I'm just going to do a little quiz. So this is your first question, just as your subheading, you need to write quiz. And the first question is, what year was the Equality Act introduced? So you're just going to write down the year the Act was introduced. Okay, your next question is question 2. The Equality Act makes it law that certain organisations and individuals must not discriminate against people with protected characteristics. Which organisation does this apply to? Does this apply to a private organisation? Does this apply to a public organisation? Does this apply to a voluntary organisation? Or D, does it apply to all organisations? So just write down the letter and for question 2. Question 3. The Equality Act protects people with particular characteristics from discrimination. Name 3 of the characteristics which are protected by law. To think of the characteristics that I spoke about earlier, for example, I can give you one such as gender, if that helps. Okay, we're moving on to the next question. Number 4, provide one example of how a school can make sure everyone has equal opportunities. So think about, as a school, what do we do here at Franklin to allow everyone to have an equal opportunity? For example, the use of the pitch. It's not just for the boys, the girls can use the pitch as well. That is one example of how everyone has equal opportunities. And question 5, provide a definition of unlawful discrimination. So this is what we looked at right at the start of the lesson. Provide a definition of unlawful discrimination. If you missed any answers, do not worry, you can write in the answers when I reveal them to you. Okay, so it's really important you try your best here. Okay, so the answer for question 1 was 2010, and that is when the Equality Act was passed in 2010. Question 2, the Equality Act makes it law that certain organisations must not discriminate against people with protected characteristics. Which organisations does this apply to? And it's D, it's all organisations must follow the Equality Act. Number 3, name 3 of the characteristics which are protected by law. So we've got a range: age, disability, gender, marriage and civil partnerships, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex or sexual orientation. So any of the 3 here, and if you haven't managed to get 3, that's absolutely fine, just write them in now. Number 4, provide one example of how a school can make sure everyone has equal opportunities. For example, like I said, providing football lessons for girls and boys, or making sure students of all races and religions understand beliefs and religions different to their own. Also, for example, subjects such as science, they're not just for boys to do. Girls are also studying these subjects as well. Maths, whereas before, as we learned in history, a lot of boys, when they would go to boarding school, would do the boyish subjects such as maths, fencing and these sort of subjects, whereas girls would learn about etiquette and things like that. Whereas now it's not like that. We have a curriculum that we follow, that we all follow. It's not just for boys or just girls to follow, everyone follows it, which allows us to be a school displaying equality. Provide a definition of discrimination, and that is treating someone unfairly because of their protected characteristics. And we know that the protected characteristics are these characteristics here that I mentioned earlier. So well done if you got the questions correct, and if you haven't, that's absolutely fine. Please go in and write in your corrections, so this will help you with your case studies later on in the lesson. Okay, so we now have some case studies which are real life scenarios that have been put into a case study for us to answer. We have 3 questions, 3 key questions we need to answer. So the first one is, what protected characteristics is potentially being discriminated against? Could this be unlawful discrimination under the Equality Act 2010? And lastly, what action could the person take? This case study 1 here is for me to answer, so you're going to watch me answer this, and then you have 2 further case studies to complete yourself. So I'm going to just switch over to the visualizer now so you can see me answer these questions. So I've got okay, so you can see my first case study here. You don't need to print yours out. It's just that I'd like us to see the case study and the questions at the same time instead of switching through my PowerPoint. So I'm just going to read the case study out to you. It says, I use a wheelchair to get around and I'm finding it very hard to get a place at my local college. I want to study science and the labs are on the 1st floor. The college hasn't got a lift and they say they can't afford to have one put in just for me, so I must go somewhere else. Traveling any distance is really difficult and expensive, so I don't want to go to another college. Okay, so that's my case study here. It's a scenario I've been given. And I need to go in and answer these 3 questions. So I have the first question, which is, what protected characteristic is potentially being discriminated against? Remember, discriminated means to be treated unfairly because of a protected characteristic. Could this be unlawful discrimination under the Equality Act 2010? Unlawful, remember, it's breaking the law. And then lastly, what action could the person take? Well, what I've done here is I have a copy of my reading, and I'm going to keep my case study next to me so I can see the case study as well and the questions. So you will have access to the reading as well, so please use this as it has all the facts that will help you answer the question. The first question is, what protected characteristic is potentially being discriminated against? The different types of protected characteristics are here. We have 9 different protected characteristics. Is age being discriminated here? Is this person being treated unfairly because of their age? No, it's not. Number 2, is it disability? I would agree that it's disability, as this person has a wheelchair and finds it difficult to walk, and therefore that is why they have a wheelchair. So the first their protected characteristic that's potentially being discriminated against is their disability. So I'm going to write number 1 here, and I'm going to write disability. So disability is the protected characteristic that is broken here. So number 2, the second question is, could this be unlawful under the Equality Act 2010? So let's have a look in the text if this can be unlawful under the Equality Act 2010. So the Equality Act 2010 makes sure that people with particular characteristics are protected from discrimination. Remember, discrimination to be treated unfairly. These are protected characteristics. Because disability is part of a protected characteristic, it means it is protected under the Equality Act 2010, and therefore it is unlawful discrimination. So I would write down in on my piece of paper, yes, it is unlawful discrimination against, and I'm going to write down the protected characteristic that's broken here, against their disability. Stop. Okay, and lastly, number 3, the question is, what action, so I've got here, what action could this person take? So it might be some legal action, they might be able to speak to someone. So let's have a look. The place that we can look for action here is along here. So you should be able to see it. It says, what action can you take if you are experiencing discrimination? If you believe you have been discriminated against or treated unfairly, then you can start by complaining to the private, public or voluntary organisation. So I'm going to write down firstly, they can complain to the private, public or voluntary organisation, full stop. Okay, and this organisation actually must do something about it. Then we have, if they don't, then you can make a claim under the Equality Act 2010, and this could result in the organisation being taken to court and sued for their action. So this is another type of action a person could take. And then it is best to speak to a lawyer or contact an organisation like the Equality and Human Rights Commission, www.equalityhumanrights.com, who can offer help and advice. So I'm going to go where they can complain to the private, public or voluntary organisation. If they do not do anything, comma, because that is a subordinate clause, then it may be best to speak to a lawyer to seek professional advice. So this is what I recommended to the person to do because of the discrimination they have received, I would say that they should complain to the private or public or voluntary organisation. If they don't do anything, then it's best to speak to a lawyer. A lawyer is someone that is educated in their field, so they will be able to help this person with the law and help them find justice. And hopefully this person does end up getting a lift in their school, because no one should be discriminated against because of their disability. So you have 2 case studies to answer now. So I'm just going to show you your case studies. So I've just answered this one here, as you can see, and you have 2 here to answer. So you're going to pause the video here, get hold of the Equality Act 2010 fact sheet, and this will help you to answer these 2 case studies. Just like I showed you modelling, I wrote down case study 1 and then answered those 3 questions. I'd like you to do that for each of the questions here, questions here. So you have 1 case study here and then another case study here. So just label them, number them number 1 and number 2. So have a go at those, and we will discuss through the answers. Okay, so we're going to now discuss through your answers. Only continue with this section of the video if you have finished, and if you haven't, please do not continue. It's really important you finish off first and then come back to find out the answers. So this case study 2, I was refused an apprenticeship at a local hairdresser because I wear a hijab, which is a headscarf, and they say all staff must wear their hair in trendy styles to impress the customers. I am not prepared to do this as it is against my belief. What protected characteristic is potentially being discriminated against? Here it is the person's religion or belief. This person is Muslim, and they are being discriminated against because of their religion, and which is obviously not showing equality, and therefore their protected characteristic here is broken. So that one is religion, race or religion for number 1. Number 2, could this be unlawful discrimination under the Equality Act 2010? And it can be, it is discrimination against somebody's beliefs and what they worship. So that is definitely discrimination. And then what action could this person take? So you could either say they could complain to the private, public or voluntary organisation, and if they don't do something about it, they can the organisation can actually be taken to court and sued, so they have to pay a large sum of money towards this person. Or lastly, they could speak to a lawyer and seek professional advice from that lawyer. So 3 different reasons you could have written down. And lastly, for case study 3, one of my friends who is a girl has said, I can't be a social care worker because it is a girl's job. She said all men that work as social workers are probably gay. Now, this is definitely discrimination against somebody's sexual orientation. So it's really important that you've written that down for number 1. The first one is sexual orientation. Number 2, could this be unlawful discrimination against the Equality Act 2010? And yes, it is. It is going against somebody's sexual orientation. So again, this is not showing equal treatment. It's unequal treatment against somebody's sexual orientation, and that is definitely not how we should treat somebody. So yes, it is unlawful discrimination. And then lastly, what action could this person take? So this person could complain to private, public or voluntary organisation, and they must do something about it. And if they don't, then they can actually, under the Equality Act 2010, be taken to court and sued for their claim for not taking the action. And then, or lastly, they could speak to a lawyer who can be contacted through the Equality and Human Rights Commission and on the website www.equalityhumanrights.co.uk. And this lawyer can help to give advice and help about the discrimination the person has received. So I hope equality now makes sense to you all. We're very lucky to be living in a time where we live in an equal society, and men and women, not just men and women, but all the 9 protected characteristics are considered within society. So it's really important we understand how lucky we are to be able to do this, as some people still are not living in an equal society, which is obviously not nice. So I'd like you now to continue with your next lesson, and I will see you all on Monday.